Okay, hi. Very late to the game, but we are finally going to be talking about my favorite reads of 2022. I had a good reading year. I track my feelings on a book, so I will give it, it's like star ratings, but I don't use stars. I will put if I hated a book, disliked a book, felt neutral about a book, liked a book, or loved a book. And in that liked and loved section was 55% of the books I finished, which is quite high. And so I feel like I've been doing a lot better job of like finding like my niche of books. But I haven't, and even the books that I loved, it's like I really loved them in the moment, which is when I give it this classification, I guess. But they might not necessarily like stick with me forever. I thought like the book was really well done and all of that, but I don't necessarily, it doesn't like live in my soul, if that makes sense. And so I don't have a ton of books, even given the high number that I liked or loved, that I really feel like talking about today. Because yeah, like nothing really like punched me in the gut and like made me feel things. And what I did notice from the ones I wanted to choose are things like that like made me feel a lot of emotions. Or they were just like, there was just something about the book's vibe that is memorable to me. I wouldn't say these are necessarily like my absolute favorites that I read, but they're the ones that are sticking with me. So some of them, it's because they were surprising. Some of them, it's just because it was unlike anything I'd ever read before. And some of them because I truly did just really love the book. So I guess we'll get into it. There's no order because you can't rank books against each other when they're not trying to do the same thing. I don't subscribe to that notion. The first one I wanted to talk about is a romance. It is Radiance by Grace Draven. So this book is a true friends to lovers. And that is why it made it onto this list for me. I feel like I've read in the romance genre a decent number of friends to lovers books, but they generally like were friends at one point, or they were friends and there was something more or something of that nature. This one, like truly friends to lovers. So they start out not friends at all. They have to build that friendship. They are in an arranged marriage of sorts, and they are different humanoid species. She's a human and he is something else. And they find each other hideous. They meet before the wedding and they're like cracking jokes at each other's appearance. And then they find out that they're getting married. And when they find out, they're like, that's funny. And so because they have like no sexual attraction to each other, they really develop like a strong friendship between the two of them where they like truly care about each other. And then finally that like in a slow burn fashion becomes love. I prefer too when a romance has like that third act conflict where it is external things happening from the relationship, because a lot of the ones that happen in a relationship can feel really contrived. So just all around one of my favorite romances I've ever read, and yeah, really liked this one. The next one I want to talk about was one of the first books I read in 2022, and there was just something really weird about it. And how it was told and what it was about, and I just liked it. So it is Memoirs of a Porcupine. This is translated from the French. The author is from the Republic of Congo. And this is a story where a porcupine is telling his life story to a tree. And it's reminiscing about its relationship to a human who was like he was like the evil double for. The porcupine's kind of telling the story of this man who was not a good person and kind of utilized his evil, like it's kind of like you're born with this evilness with you, and or it's like passed on to you, and it's like all of like the horrible things that they kind of do together, and it just is told from the perspective of the porcupine kind of like lamenting these things to the tree, and I just thought it was a really interesting read, and I would like more people to give it a try. This one is more of like a I guess like less of a favorite book and more of like a favorite author. So I read 2 more books in 2022 by Sarah Waters. I read Tipping the Velvet and I read The Paying Guest. There's just something about the tone of Sarah Waters' books that I really appreciate. They're all fairly different from each other in plot, but they can have a lot of similar themes to them. So Tipping the Velvet is much more of a coming of age of a queer woman in Victorian London, and you kind of see her through multiple phases of her life, and each phase of the book is like a little, it's much different in plot and substance. I liked that one. I didn't love it. And then there was The Paying Guest, which I was much more of a fan of, but I really liked both of them. And in this, you meet this family, and it is only a mother and her daughter, and they're both living in this house that is well beyond their means, and so they take on paying guests, and they take on this younger couple, and it's very slow, and it's like a character story at the beginning, and then plot comes into play about halfway through the book, and I just found that one like a really like a whirlwind of a read, while also being quite fun. So I only have one Sarah Waters book left. I think it's The Night Watch, which is a little bit depressing because I really love her style. But yeah, just wanted to say she's like kind of filling in a slot of a favorite author, and I have just like slowly been getting through all of her backlist. The next one I want to talk about is The Devourers by Indra. So this is it's kind of like a literary fantasy. So you're following a man who meets this mysterious stranger one night who starts telling him this tale, and he then agrees to start transcribing different texts for this man, and it's the kind of completion of this story. So you have this modern or more modern context that you're in, but then you also have this story, the one that he is transcribing, from the 1700s in India. You're following people in both stories, you're following creatures in the story, humanoid creatures, and their interactions and how their interactions have changed over time. And I found I found the past story in the 1700s like very fascinating, but it connected in such a way to the modern story that I found myself intrigued by both of them. And yeah, overall there was something very like appealingly sinister about it. And yeah, I would just really recommend it to people who read literary fiction and like don't really find themselves dabbling in fantasy but would want to. Okay, this one was just very surprising to me. It kind of opened up a whole world for me. So it is Manacled by SenLinYu. This is a fan fiction. I had never read fan fiction before, and I read this in December, and since then have just read a ton of fan fiction. So this is a Harry Potter fan fiction. It is a Draco Hermione ship story. It is very dark. I found the most, I think, intriguing part of delving into a world, a fan fiction world, a world that I've spent so much time in through my childhood, and seeing someone else play with plot line and kind of move away from canon and reshape the world in a different context was really fascinating. She chose to change the canon at the beginning of book 6, and the consequences of that was believable and fascinating. And I binged this so fast. If you put it into a bind up, most of the time they're over 1,000 pages. I think I read this in 3 days. But yeah, it really just opened up a whole new world of books for me. And I've read quite a number of fan fictions I've really loved since then. It's really helped me to see the stigma that the bookish community associates with fan fiction, and truly how preposterous I feel that it is. I can tell you assuredly that multiple fan fictions I read this year were way better written and plotted, and the characterization was done far better than many published reads or many published books that I read this year. So yeah, that one was such a surprise to me, and opened up a whole new scope of reading. So I found that really exciting for my personal reading journey. Okay, now we're going to talk about A Children's Bible by Lydia Millet. So this is a book that I didn't think it would stick with me as much as it did. It is about a group of teenagers, and really it's about a group of adults who knew each other from when they were young, and they decide they're going to go to just some mansion in the Northeast to vacation. And they bring all of their children. And then just a storm happens, and really weird shit starts to go down. It's kind of apocalyptic. The children and how they behave is really strange. There's a haziness to the narrative where you're never quite sure if it's for real, I guess. The way that the adults behave is kind of South Park, where the children are making all of the decisions and the adults are just kind of I'm going along with it. But yeah, there's kind of just this hallucinogenic vibe to the book that sometimes just it I read it and it's gone, but something about this book really stuck with me in its bizarre nature, and the plot moves forward and different things kind of happen, but you're mainly following the children and the decisions that they're making. Yeah, I just thought it was super weird but enjoyable. Okay, so the next one I want to talk about, I always convinced myself that I love a multi-generational saga. And I found one that I really loved, and that was Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. So this follows multiple generations of a Korean family through time. So you do get to see the chronological movement of things. There's something, I guess, for me, which is what I really like about them, the sagas like this, they're a saga. They tend to go on for a really long time. There's something about reading something like this where I really just you get to know the generations of a family. You're watching and fast forward, and people are gonna die because people don't live forever. But you kind of see the unraveling of their stories. This takes place in Korea and in Japan, and you see that in Japan, the way the Korean people are treated as you are centering around a Korean family. You get to see like how different generations are impacted by the world around them and the decisions that they choose to make. I found myself very emotionally invested in the characters. Overall, like there are times where I didn't necessarily like where a character's story went, but I appreciated like the scope of the narrative all the same. So yeah, as far as like multi-generational sagas go, this has definitely been one of my favorite I've read. And then the last one I am going to talk about is a series that I read, my favorite series of the year, and that is the Farseer Trilogy by Robin Hobb. Oh man, this is the first series, the first trilogy in the realm of the Elderling series. You are following Fitz, and you're following him in the Kingdom of the Six Duchies. He is a bastard to a prince, and you see him grow up, and you see his life in the kingdom, and what he makes of himself, and what people around him make of him. I just found the character work to be really well done, but even more so the interactions between the characters. I felt that's where this book really did thrive. It's not an intensively plot-heavy series, although each book does have that point, way late in the game where it starts to pick up and a lot of things happen. Well, that cut me off, so I hope I wasn't in the middle of saying something, but I probably was. So you're following Fitz. You're seeing he doesn't really have people his age to interact with a lot of the time, so you see him interacting with the adults in his life, how they all treat him based on their own station, and how he feels and sees each of these people in the space that they hold in his life. I found the second book to be my favorite plotting wise. It was the most interesting. There was a lot of excitement in it and tension with the characters. I think that Robin Hobb can write a really good villain where you really hate the person. And yeah, overall, I just thought that the series was really great. And I have started the next trilogy, The Live Ship Traders, in this, but I'm excited to read the entirety of the Realm of the Elderling because Robin Hobb is definitely has just she can just write a sentence. Robin Hobb can just write a beautiful sentence to get a point across. Those were my favorite fiction reads of 2022, but that is all I got. So I have been watching people's videos for their favorites of the year slowly, but if you don't have a channel, feel free to pop down your favorites of 2022, and that is all I got. So until next time, happy reading.